Hi y'all, welcome to segment 2. So let's talk about grief. There are several models of grief out there, and the one that we are going to look at is the developmental model, the developmental theory of grief by Robert Niemeyer. So based on Erik Erikson's stages of development, Robert Niemeyer likes to look at grief through the lens of transition into different developmental stages. Specifically, the mourner that goes through a loss is moving through periods of loss to periods of adjustment to periods of stability, right? So one way to look at grief is that an external crisis will come into our life. And actually, you can look at anything in life through this model. So an external crisis will come into your life, and this external crisis forces you to wrestle between two tensions. So for example, trust and mistrust when something happens, right? In our wrestling and working through this tension creates an integration. An integration is a sort of new way of looking at things, a new foundation that we build for ourselves as we wrestle through this. Through this foundation, then, we can face new challenges and new crises from a place of new resilience, new strength. So sort of like a crisis on your muscles, or you putting weight on your muscle when you're strength training, and then it grows and becomes stronger, and then you can put more weight on that. So Robert Niemeyer likes to look at grief through this lens. And so we're going to explore right now the 3 periods of grief, and then each period has significant elements aimed at helping the mourner, you, move from one developmental stage to another. Okay? So let's explore these periods. The first period is called the early grief reacting. So in this period, the mourner may feel injury to the ego as she suffers feelings of loss of self as related to the loved one. When a loved one in our life passes away, we experience an actual physical breakage and attachment. And part of our attachments to other people involve our self. And so when a loved one passes away, then part of our self actually dies. And this is why we feel so much physiological pain and loss. So states of disbelief and then an oscillation between reality and dissociated states is common during this period and may last for weeks after the loss. This means that in one moment, we will be facing reality. Oh my goodness, my loved one is not here. In other moments, we will feel like, okay, are they really not here? Are they here? So that would be your brain trying to figure out what is going on. So the crisis during this period is a polarization between feelings of connection versus feelings of isolation. One moment we feel like, where's my loved one? Like I need this connection. And in another moment you feel like, okay, they're not here. So I feel isolated by myself, right? Integration in this period looks like self-acceptance. So the mourner tends to ask questions like, how and why did this happen, right? This did happen. And so we need to wrestle with this question and then accept ourselves in this situation. To promote integration in this period, we must prioritize psychological elements of safety, trust, and survival. So looking for opportunities, environments, people that we do feel safe with, that we can trust with ourselves, our emotions, our confusions, our wrestling. And specifically, survival has to do with, well, security. Am I safe in what am I doing, or where am I going, or who am I with? So in this period, we want to get around people and ourselves with our own journal who will listen, will show compassion, and help us emotionally regulate and learn to contain ourselves. So just a reminder, when we have another person who is safe and secure in our life and we are grieving or struggling, then our body only uses about 20% of energy to self-regulate because we are co-regulating. When we're by ourselves, we use more like 60 to 80% of energy to self-regulate. So, though it's good for us to learn to self-regulate and it's part of this process, it's also good for us to have people in our life that will help us co-regulate. Just make sure these people are safe. These people are people that you can share stories and have a space where you can process emotions and feelings. So let's talk about the second period that is called middle grief, the period of reconstructing. Okay, this period is typically experienced months after the loss. So during this time, the mourner tends to wrestle between security and insecurity. During this period, it's common to struggle with the reality of the death of the loved one, and specifically in suicide loss, with the way that the loved one left you. We create integration here by creating continuing bonds, and we will discuss that a little more later. So this is done by facing the reality that the loved one is actually physically gone. And then what we do is we create a new healthy bond, a spiritual bond. We tend to ask here, where is my loved one? Where do I locate them? Where did they go? So this is a period where many ask these big existential types of questions, like where are they? Here, we need to find validation, we need to find understanding, and we learn to tell the story of the loved one. And here we create a way of bonding with the loved one that is integrative, whole, resilient, and where we bring out elements that are positive and healthy from that relationship, and we integrate those elements into our moving forward journey. So the third period is called later grief, and it's all about reorienting yourself, okay? This period is typically experienced years after the loss. So during this period, the mourner tends to wrestle between meaning and meaninglessness. So maybe notice where you are right now, the different polarities that you're struggling with. Are you finding elements of meaning in your loss right now? Or are you still struggling with meaninglessness? Or are you in both, right? As the mourner creates meaning out of their suffering, they experience growth in a way to move forward. Our brain is designed to create a meaningful narrative. It is out of these narratives that we create for ourselves that we can then move forward and build our lives forward. Anytime we have memories that are unprocessed or still have traumatic, pathogenic, unresolved elements to them, they will trigger us and pull us back. And so anytime triggering happens, I used to be upset with myself when I would get triggered, and still to this day things will trigger me, right? But now I remind myself, oh, you're being triggered. That means there's something that's coming up, something that's being activated, and it wants you to look at it and to face it and to create meaning there, in order to take that meaning and to extrapolate it and build your future with it. And in some ways, you want to look at this as we are reorienting for the rest of our lives, because as most of you know, life isn't easy. Difficulties are constantly coming our way, not just with grief and loss, but with not just grief and loss with our loved ones, but with dreams and expectations and vocational endeavors and etc. And so part of the human journey is to equip ourselves with these tools and skills, and to remind ourselves along the way on this journey, okay, I'm in this phase, or maybe I'm in this period, and what do I need here? What questions do I need to answer here? What questions do I need to wrestle with here to move forward? So what I want you to do now is If you need to read or listen through this segment, do that. But also bring up your PDF, and in the PDF, there's going to be questions. So I want you to spend some time, get a drink, put on some music, get out in nature, and so spend some time answering these questions, okay? And I will see you in the next segment.